Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Hello, Patrick Donoghue here, news editor with the Irish Farmers Journal. For the past few weeks, we've been reporting on the serious difficulties caused by bad weather, particularly in western counties. On Tuesday, my colleague Pat O'Toole joined the IFA delegation lobbying politicians ahead of Budget Day, and he asked three county chairmen about the situation in their area: Michael Chance of Donegal, JP Cowley of Sligo, and James Gallagher from Leitrim.
I'll start with Michael in Donegal. Michael, how bad are things at the moment?
The situation is very difficult at the minute. We have farmers with cattle in. I know one farmer cattle in since July, sucking cows, and he got them out for a week, had to bring them back in again. We're facing a major problem in the spring with both fodder shortage, animal welfare, and also farmer welfare.
And this is in September. We can see that coming already. So there's a real need for plans to be put in place at this point to try and guide us through the winter. JP, talk to us about what the situation in Sligo.
Yeah, well, as Michael said, this part of Sligo are very, very, very serious. Like, there's cows in there this last 2 weeks. Those men that has those cows in has only probably a part of their fodder for the winter. They'll be out by January, and it's very serious, because as I see it in Sligo, I'd be afraid that there'll be an exodus of the suckling herd, and that'll be unreal, because this part of Sligo only suited for suckling, and if the suckler cow goes, that's it. It's at the end of the rural community, the ruralness of the county, because even though the national average is 17, 18 cows, like this, the 14, 15 cow in, the 16 cow in there, they all contribute to part of the community. And, I'd be afraid for rural life and for rural the West in general, that there would be a diminished suckler cows.
James, your two fellow county chairmen are painting a fairly bleak picture. Is it the same in Leitrim?
Yes, it's. I could echo what my colleagues have said. This is weather related. I suppose we should emphasise that for the summer months, for June, there was four dry days, complete dry days recorded. That's the information that goes into Met Éireann. For July, we had 2, August 1, and so far in September, we haven't had a 24-hour dry period.
So not a dry week then since the start of the summer?
Since the start of the summer. And this is what has caused the hardship, and the hardship that is about to be lavished on us as a result of this weather.
Michael, just in relation to Donegal, renowned for potatoes and tillage of all sorts, real problems for that sector at the moment.
Yeah, there's big problems with the tillage. We have about 40% of our spring cereal or spring barley crop to cut. I would estimate at this stage you're heading towards 50% of yield loss, and when that was at full yield, it wasn't going to make money.
Is there anything that can be done? I mean, you were here today and you were meeting the TDs from your own constituencies and from right across the country. I think it's fair to say there is an understanding now. There seems to be a clear understanding among the politicians of the extent of the problems. Is there anything that they can do? And did you get the sense that they're willing to make unprecedented steps to try and address the problems?
Well, I'd say, to put first things first, like, this is a red flag being raised in time, because it's not now, in the next few weeks, but it's in the next few months. And by taking action now, a lot can be saved in welfare of animals, but more important, welfare of farmers, because by the middle of January, February, and have no feed and have received poor price for cattle not thriving this year, and cash flow very low on farms, there will be severe pressure on both farmer and livestock, because if you haven't cash to buy fodder, where are you going?
When we had the fodder crisis 3 years ago, it was the IFA branch network that was really instrumental in distributing the little bit of fodder that was available around the worst affected areas. But are people ready to go to the well again and to get stuck in and to put an action plan in place?
Yes, I think the IFA won't be found wanting if when the need arises. And as you mentioned earlier, our meeting today with the politicians, they looked favourable on us. Let's hope that they put some action plan in place. As JP has just said, the warning is there in time to try to avert a serious situation.
Gentlemen, thank you very much.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
So support for farmers hit by constant rain is a priority. But what else do farmers want from the next budget? Pat asked the IFA's Farm Business Chairman Martin Stapleton.
We knew at the start of this year it was going to be a difficult year for every sector, and it has panned out that way. I think the pigs were the first sector to show a turnaround earlier on in the year. Hopefully things are looking more optimistic now for dairy farmers. The other sectors, especially the grain, they are facing crisis. Most parts of the country this year had a reasonably good, weather-wise, they had a reasonably good year throughout the summer. But there are parts of the country, specifically the west, the northwest and the very southwest, where grain has completely failed to be harvested, where in the northwest where silage isn't made. Those farmers are facing a crisis, and we have to be terribly conscious of those. We have to see that viability is maintained in those farm families.
Within the parameters of the budget, what exactly can the government do, and what are you calling on them to do to address the current situation?
Well, on the expenditure side of things, we have a list of measures there. They're primarily keeping the commitments that were made with the Rural Development Plan in 2014. And I think that if they step up to the plate and keep those commitments and honour those commitments in this year's budget, it will put money back in farmers' pockets. It's about reinforcing the commitment to the GLAS scheme, the TAM scheme, the beef and sheep schemes, to get to a stage where we're putting €200 per cow into the pocket of sector farmers, to provide 20 million for the sheep farmers. And again, I suppose the TAMS is another one where we are behind primarily because of the delay in getting the paperwork sorted for the farmers this year, to make sure that the money that was allocated for this year is carried over and money put in place again for next year to make sure that scheme is maximised to the full.
One scheme that we know will be delivered in the budget because it's part of the programme for government is the sheep scheme. One that we understand is not due for another 12 months is the restoration of 25 million of funding into the disadvantaged area scheme, now the ANC. In the light of the situation in the west of Ireland, are IFA looking for that to be delivered a year early?
Absolutely. We are looking for that 25 million to be brought forward. We're incredibly conscious that next year we're facing a review of the ANC scheme, and I suppose it is a difficult time to set the real value of the ANC scheme. We can see that value in the way that it puts money into farmers' pockets, and always when you have a downturn, it is the farmers in the difficult areas who are the most badly affected.
Outside of that, is there anything that the government can do in terms of, say, taxation measures? I know IFA have a proposal which is meant to cope with exactly the situation we're in here now, where if there's a fallow year where farmers have something to draw on to pay tax. But unfortunately, that measure is not in place where you can bank money away in a good year. But is there anything the government can do in a bad year to allow farmers maintain some cash on farm?
Yeah, well, we have a proposal that as regards the income averaging measure, and there's two proposals in there, and those proposals are designed primarily to encourage farmers to avail of income averaging. We've done research, we've tested the waters to see why farmers haven't availed of income averaging, because it is a very good scheme in the sense that it allows farmers to average their income over the 5 years and make sure that, and the real gain in this is that farmers don't go from a situation where they have personal tax credit that they can't avail of in 1 year, and the following year they find themselves in the high tax bracket and then go back again and losing the ability to claim those same tax credits again. So by availing of income averaging, farmers can have a situation whereby they flatten out their income and they fall in the same tax bracket every year. Our proposal, and it's twofold. First of all, is that those farmers whose spouses are self-employed, we're suggesting that there's no longer a good reason why they can't avail of income averaging. And we're also saying that in a difficult year, like we have this year, that the increase that would naturally come from an averaging scheme, that increase would be deferred for 2 or 3 years down the line until the cycle of the volatility goes around again and you get it on the upswing when farmers can afford to take it out of their pockets. One other measure that we're proposing this year that would directly put money in farmers' pockets this year is bringing forward the earned income tax credit. That was proposed to be brought in over 3 years, and we're suggesting this year it is a really good option of putting money into rural economies, because it directly allows an increase of €650 into the pockets of farmers.
And then there's a lot of talk about benchmarking at the moment and public sector pay, but this would only be bringing farmers' allowances and the allowances of the self-employed up to what exists for PAYE, isn't that correct?
Exactly. For a long number of years, the PAYE sector has had that advantage over farmers and the self-employed, that they've had a PAYE allowance. The earned income tax credit is meant to equalise that. That's all it is to create an equal playing field for everyone.
There's been a lot of discussion about the Fair Deal scheme in recent years. Newspaper reports at the weekend suggesting there's going to be a breakthrough in the upcoming budget. Are IFA hopeful that the years of ceaseless lobbying to remove farm assets from the Fair Deal scheme may see some benefit?
Yes, we are optimistic. It's in the programme for government that there is a commitment to solve this problem once and for all. We put forward a proposal ourselves earlier on in the year that rather than having the commitment from farmers reflecting the value of the asset, that it would reflect the earned income capability of that asset. We see that as being fair. We see that as being reflective, whereby a farm would pay in accordance with its contribution to earned income. And it's very similar. What we're proposing is very similar to the scheme agricultural relief, which is used in deciding capital taxes on transfer of the farm. And that too was designed in order to reflect the earning potential of the farm. We're optimistic this government in this budget can bring about a change so that we have fair play as regards the Fair Deal, because we have always argued that asking farmers to use the value of their farm asset to pay for the nursing costs was destroying the viability of many of the farms.
Martin Stapleton, thank you very much.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
On this podcast last week, you may have heard from Agriculture Minister Michael Creed, who hinted that better income tax options may become available to farmers soon. Now let's hear from the opposition benches. I met with Fianna Fáil's agriculture spokesman and Donegal TD Charlie McConalogue at the ploughing last week.
It's been a very unusual year in the level of rainfall in the west compared to Midlands in the east, and it's a difficult year for grain in general, with prices being below the cost of production. So all farmers are taking a hit, but particularly then in the western counties. In one county, for example, 2/3 of the spring crop is still not in, and some farmers haven't done any of it in, and it's absolute crisis proportions for them.
Budgets are often locked in and whatnot, but does the Department of Finance need to look at that in the budget in next couple of weeks?
I think they need to look at it before that, and certainly it'll probably be the budget before things announced, but they need to give an indication that they are going to provide some type of support to those farmers, particularly those that can't get the crop out. I think deserve a crisis fund and an emergency fund. Like last year, you go back to the end of last year when the flooding happened, a lot of farmers lost crops, fodder, etc., and there was a crisis fund put in place for those that were hit that acutely back then. And I think something of the same nature needs to be put in check now. Like those who don't get the crop, obviously they don't get paid for it at all.
A couple of the big ticket items, I suppose, going into the election for you guys, probably the biggest one was the €200 suckler cow payment.
Yes.
What has been happening on that since the government's been formed?
Well, I think we're continuing to press it, and we're monitoring very closely as well the current spend under the current cap, and trying to ensure that it's, first of all, that the schemes are properly funded, but any underspend that's in that, we believe that it should be directed to try and support the suckler cow. And particularly now when we come up to the mid-term review, we'll be pushing to try and ensure that we can reach the €200 mark for the first 20 cows. We think it's an important support for suckler farmers. It's important to keep our suckler herd up, and we'll be trying to ensure in terms of that the funds can got to actually try and bring that support in.
Did you want the job? Is this the portfolio that you wanted to be in?
I grew up suckler and sheep farm in Donegal, so I was in Wellies from I could walk, and that was how our family made an income. I farmed for a while myself as well. My brother is running the farm at home now, so I have a great graft of land, a great love of farming, and I suppose if I had to pick a brief, it would be the brief I would like to do. So I'm really enjoying it so far, and the Dáil didn't really only was up and running for a short period before the summer, so we're really looking forward to coming back now and getting stuck in.
The Irish Farmers Journal weekly podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
On Monday, Nathan Tuffy of the Irish Farmers Journal livestock team met with Pat Duffy, the new chairman of Arrivo. He asked him how the co-op has managed through the recent period of low milk prices.
I was lucky that my appointment coincided in somewhat with a lift in dairy markets. Look, we have a number of strands to the support that we are giving to our farmers. You have to remember that the first half of 2016 we were dealing with a powders market that was returning in the region of 16 cents a litre. And while price paid to the producer was around 23 cents a litre, we supported that price from our other businesses. 23 cents a litre isn't sustainable at farm level. The strength of our outside businesses that helped us to support that, and by that I mean our purchasing in For Goodness Shakes, our agri-business, our mart division, all those divisions, that's what a co-op is about. When one sector is in difficulty, it comes in and supports the other sector.
During the talk earlier on, we were talking about the cost of production for farmers and, no margin at the moment, but as a co-op, what have Revo done in terms of trying to keep their costs under control?
I suppose if we take the last 12 months, we have consolidated our total liquid milk business. We were operating out of two sites, one in Sligo Town and one in Killygarden. We have incorporated them into the one site in Killygarden. I suppose the negativity that surrounded the closure of Sligo dairies, while it's regrettable to see jobs going out of an area, the decision to take out those costs was to pass back as much as we possibly can to our primary producer, and that's what our co-op is focused on. Another example in the last 12 months is closing of our Connery butter plant. We took the decision, not an easy one, to invest in Kerrygold Park. This is a case where manufacturing is returning to Ireland. We have a small stakeholding in it. We saved on our investment. We would have had to invest somewhere in the region of 78 million to put in a butter processing facility where we would only be able to have enough production in for 1.5 to 2 days a week. We have a shareholding in the new business. It's very successful. I think it's a new idea, a new way of going in the dairy industry.
You talked earlier on about supporting farmers or supporting the milk price from the other businesses. We have seen an upturn in the dairy markets in the last couple of months. If things take a downturn next year, would the co-op be in a position to be able to support the price again, or is that something that you could or would do?
That is something we have always done. Our greatest fear would be that this upturn is going to be very short-lived. Thankfully, the weeks goes on, it seems to be getting stronger, but I suppose you're dealing with a world market. The market is in growth by 1.5 to 2% for dairy products worldwide. Once production increases by 2 to 3%, that 1% extra milk on the market can have a very negative effect. I suppose there's two things to bear in mind. 2015, we've seen the end of quotas. That's a new era for everybody in the industry. Let's hope that the first initial shocks of that happen has caused this huge spike in volatility. Remember, we have went from nearly 40 cents a litre to almost a half of it within a 2.5 year period. That's not sustainable at farm level, nor is it sustainable at processor level. So we have always supported our farmers. As we said here tonight, we have our fixed milk price scheme. That scheme will only be as good as the next scheme we put together when the markets are at a higher point. As I said, milk price stability funds, we had a fund set up in 2015. I suppose the eternal question is, when is the price high enough in Ireland to take money to put it into a stability fund? And that's something that we'll be working with our producers, our board and with the farming organisations, because we do need to have something there in the kitty to support the price of milk when the farmer gets into trouble.
You've been on the board of Revo for a long time now, for several years, and I suppose you've seen a lot of changes over the time. Okay, you're just starting your tenure as chairman, but what would be the key things that you would like to achieve or you'd like to kind of do as chairman of the co-op?
I suppose if I was to look at three things that I would like to achieve over my term in co-op, as I said here tonight, our strength and our weakness over the last 5 years has been that when the market is at the highest point, we are always well up there. Sometimes when the market goes against it because of our product mix, we haven't been able to protect ourselves as much as I'd like. We measure ourselves off the KPMG Milk Price League. I think we have proved ourselves in that in 8 out of the last 10 years we paid a higher price than any of the co-ops that we benchmark ourselves with in the area we operate. I'd like to see over my time that move on one step further, that we get to the centre of the Milk Price League. KPMG is the true measurement over a year's performance, and even in a year like this I'm confident that by the year end we'll have a stronger yearly price performance than it looks right now. Secondly, I would like to see more consolidation within the industry. Yeah. I think it's something that we badly need. We have always been to the forefront of that. We amalgamated the Donegal, Connacht business into one. We can see the benefits of that. Yeah. Played our part in Kerrygold Park. Perhaps the next Kerrygold Park needs to be up in the northern half of the country. The Dairy Board is the first time for them to be involved in processing. We can process milk, we can produce milk in the west of Ireland. It's good or better than anyone else in the country. And I suppose thirdly, I'd like to see, when I'm walking out the door, whenever that is, that the co-op is in a slightly better shape than I got it. And I think there's an onus on me to try and deliver on that over my term as chairman.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Meanwhile, our market specialist Phelim O'Neill travelled to London to attend a Brexit conference organised by the farm business consultancy Andersons. There he met Richard King to discuss what the future might hold for trade between the UK and the EU post-Brexit.
The European market is obviously a key one for UK agriculture. The vast majority of our exports go there, and actually quite a lot of imports come from there as well. So some kind of continuation of our ability to trade freely with Europe would be good. And then aside from trade, obviously the support available to UK agriculture is another key message. We will be outside of the common agricultural policy. Will a UK government or the various devolved parts of the UK be as generous as the common agricultural policy? We would hope so, because that would help the future development of the industry as well. And probably the third one is around labour, access to that, because that is a sort of a key source of labour, fruit, vegetables, livestock as well now, the migrant labour from other parts of the EU.
Given the extent that migrant labour makes up, I suppose, both farming and the processing side of the UK industry, could it be, is migration as big an issue as it perhaps was suggested that it was during the referendum debate?
I think agriculture would probably be more favourable, certainly in certain sectors of agriculture, as I say, fruit, vegetable picking, but also when you get up the food chain, as you've suggested, your abattoirs, for example, we go to some of those, then there's not much indigenous population there. So the people who run these businesses would be very pro-migration, but of course, where these people have arrived, Lincolnshire is a good example, it has sort of rather changed the culture of those communities a bit, and that is why, to a certain extent, we've had the vote that we have done. So there's perhaps a mixture between sort of people's hearts and heads around this, and they kind of know that the migrants work hard, are contribute to the economy, but their hearts tell them, well, is this the country that I grew up on? These kind of things clash.
Just going back to what was the ideal outcome, I suppose you were saying continued access to the EU market and some level of farm support. How likely is this, or is that just wishful thinking?
That's a very good question. Yes, I think the noises we're getting from government, certainly those who sort of run the departments, new Department of International Trade, the Brexit Department, the Foreign Office, they are all Brexiteers, so they are perhaps looking at a more arm's length arrangement, because if we did want to keep those single market access, we would have to trade something off in terms of free movement of labour, contribution to the budget, EU red tape, taking on the regulations, and that's, in their view, not what was voted for by Brexit. So I don't think perhaps we are going to get complete market access. We may have to go for a sort of a negotiated, bespoke arrangement, which perhaps won't be as good as we've got at the moment. Then in terms of support, again, we'd perhaps be slightly worried that the UK Treasury will not be as generous as the Common Agricultural Policy.
So your overall assessment then is that the outlook for UK agriculture post-Brexit is more negative than it would be as a member of the EU?
Yes, I think that probably is our overall assumption, but of course there's so many unknowns. It depends whether we get a hard Brexit or a soft Brexit, and we shouldn't downplay the benefits. We do have a blank sheet of paper. We can produce a support arrangement that suits our agriculture better. Then there may be less money flowing through it, but actually perhaps we can use the money so much better than the CAP has done, that actually the effects are much the same. So we shouldn't be too downhearted. And of course, the fundamental pluses of UK agriculture remain. We've got 65 million affluent consumers, decent soils, decent skills, all these kind of things. So I think it'd be a bit easier to talk ourselves into a hole about this. But yes, the outcome is uncertain, and uncertainty worries people.
You made the point that agriculture in the UK is a very small part of the GDP, of the national GDP. Where does that leave then agriculture as a lobby within the UK vis-a-vis the other strong lobby groups?
Yes, again, that is potentially a problem. Agriculture on its own is less than 1% of GDP. If you add food manufacturing, it starts to build a little bit, but we are perhaps less powerful than other lobby groups. The CAP perhaps has supported us to that extent in the past. The power of the French agricultural lobby has helped us out, and other lobbies around Europe. So it's a job for the UK agricultural industry to sort of be in the ear of policymakers and make sure agriculture isn't sacrificed for some other part of the wider UK economy.
Finally, Richard, I suppose picking up on one element that was of particular interest to us, you're suggesting in your presentation that perhaps there will be a special arrangement with Ireland sorted out as part of the future arrangement between the UK and the EU?
Yes, I mean, we sort of feel, we perhaps even hope that there'd be a side clause in whatever deal is done for the future, particularly around sort of movement of people. Having a very hard border between Northern and Southern Ireland would seem to be a very retrograde step to us, particularly for the history that's gone on, and actually even before we went into the EEC.
Is that then, in terms of a freedom of movement of people, the migration issue as opposed to the trade issue? You don't see any side deal on trade, for example?
I think it's more of a people thing than a goods thing. If it was to do with goods and services, there would be quite a lot of complications around the UK and Ireland being seen as a backdoor into the European market. So I think
no special trade deal for Ireland.
I don't think
in
we're
your
talking
opinion
about trade. It's more about the sharing the one island, if you like.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
This Wednesday, Bord Bia opened the Thinking House, a new space dedicated to helping food and drink companies understand consumers better. Irish Country Living's consumer editor Ciara Leahy takes a tour with Helen King, who is the head of consumer insights at Bord Bia.
So the Thinking House is a new consumer and market insight centre. It's where Bord Bia and the consumer insight team here will work with food and drink companies to help them create and build strong brands and help them bring new products to market, using consumer understanding, market understanding as a foundation for making all of our decisions.
I suppose it's brilliant because they actually are being brought into an area that they are immersed in it to really get the thinking caps going.
Yeah, so it's a creative space. Mm-hmm. It brings companies away from their day-to-day, daily activities. As you say, it helps them think a little bit differently. We are trained professionals to facilitate sessions, to do creative thinking. And really, as an environment, it's stimulating, it's inspiring, and it's lovely to work in and to think in.
It looks very pretty as well. Today at the launch, it became very clear that the consumer is definitely brought to the centre at the Thinking House. You say the consumer is always right, but they can send a confusing message, and that the Thinking House is like a filter on that. Tell me more about that message.
So the consumer is often confused. Here in the Thinking House, we have trained professionals, qualitative researchers, experienced brand specialists. Our role is to talk to consumers, engage with them, in some instances abroad, live with them, really understand their lives, their culture, their values, their aspirations. You need to be able to understand what they're saying and what they mean. Mm-hmm. Often we need to observe what they're doing because they may say one thing but actually do the other. So here it's being professional in our approach, and it's understanding how do we filter what they really mean and what is going to actually make them make a choice at the fixture, what's going to make them pick up a brand, what's going to make them choose something over something else. Mm-hmm. Because just talking to people, putting them in a room often doesn't really work. So you really need to know the difference, the psychology behind what they're doing, and be trained in understanding those signals they're giving you.
Excellent. You introduced us today at the launch with the words of Steve Jobs as he launched the iPhone. He said, "I've waited 2.5 years for this day," and you said you feel the exact same. Tell me why you feel this way and where the idea came from, because it really is your baby, isn't it?
Yeah, so I suppose I would have started in Bord Bia. It was just myself looking at the consumer. We now have a professional team of 13 people. 3 or 4 years ago, we did a review of global best practice in the food and drink industry. Mm-hmm. What are the companies that are successful? How do they go about their business. So we reviewed the likes of Unilever, Procter & Gamble, Nestle, and what we saw from them is most of those had centres for consumer insight or centres of innovation. All of them used consumer insight, customer insight, getting really close to who they were trying to sell to or to influence to be successful. So we used that and we said, well, how can we work with the food and drink industry? How can we be more professional and more successful? And that is where the idea of the Thinking House came through. So it was about 3 years ago. So today at the launch, I know exactly how Steve Jobs felt. I'm delighted. I'm absolutely, thankful to my colleagues and to Aidan Cotter, our Chief Executive at Board B, for supporting this.
Excellent. Just the last thing that we talked about. I suppose when you're a small company and you're starting out, I mean, just getting success in Ireland can be, a massive achievement. But it is about, definitely in here in the Thinking House, looking at the bigger picture, even looking at the international. Tell me a bit more about that.
So for small brands, they need to be as professional and instill best practice across everything they do. Often they don't have marketing teams or certainly insight teams. So we work with them and act as marketing consultants, as insight specialists with them. So we have a dedicated program for smaller businesses. We call it Super Brands. That's about marketing consultancy, consumer insight, research here and in Britain, and then design. And that program is to say, you might be small, but let's look at the broader opportunities. Let's behave like a big player and do the best we can. But internationally, exports are our focus. We look at the domestic market, but really we need to drive growth across the world. We need to achieve our ambitious targets of Foodwise 2025. So we have to understand cultural differences to where we're exporting to, if we look at our beef communications or our dairy communications, consumers in Germany are fundamentally different to consumers in China. So we need to understand those differences. We need to understand what US customers are looking for and use our base ingredients, our fantastic products, but just tweak our messaging to make sure that we're resonating the best we can in those export markets. So our programs are very much geared towards international success, whether or not you're a small player, medium-sized or a large player.
Helen, thank you so much for your update on the Thinking House. We're really looking forward to hearing about the companies that are going to get in here, get their teeth stuck into it, and there'll be more about that in Irish Country Living.
The Irish Farmers Journal weekly podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Well, the ploughing is over for another year, and a small number of the 280,000 who made their way to Tullamore went home with trophies from a range of competitions. The Irish Farmers Journal team met some of those winners at Screggan last week.
So this is Alice O'Sullivan with the Farmers Journal here. I'm joined by John Whelan.
Reversible national
ploughing champion. And John, congratulations on the win. Another title to Cabinet.
Yeah, it's been a very, very good day. I ploughed yesterday. I didn't probably plough as well as I could have had, and delighted to go out in the grassland today now and plough really well and come back out as national champion. I'm looking forward now to going to the World Championships in Kenya next year.
Exactly. Weather conditions, do they affect you in any way?
Yeah, well, actually very helpful for us. Probably not so good for the patrons walking around, but we'll actually love to see the rain coming because it moistens the ground and it makes the ploughing conditions a lot more favourable. Out in the grassland today is a very, very high standard of work, and it just allows us to show what we can do when the ground conditions are right.
Amy Fitzgibbon here, news reporter with the Irish Farmers Journal. I'm here at the Certified Irish Angus Schools competition at Ploughing 2016. I'm here with one of the finalist schools, Coláiste Trasa from Kanturk in County Cork. So I'm here with Aoife, Maura and Chloe. Right. So girls, tell me a bit about the competition and what's kind of involved.
So it started off last year when we saw the poster in school. What we had to do was make a 3-minute video and then give it into the judges, and from then 140 schools entered it. It was cut down to 40 then, and we went to Mitchellstown for interviews. So I made a presentation and some beef sandwiches for them, and the judges were like people from ABP and Keepack and an ag science teacher and so on. And then it was cut down to 20 and we went up to Croke Park and we had stands there and we were interviewed again and we were on the camera and stuff, and Then we cut down to five finalists here now in the ploughing.
You're getting 5 calves and you're going to keep them till next November. You're slaughtering them. Okay. So tell me about the practicalities of then looking after the calves. What would that entail?
We're keeping them at Frank Murphy's farm in Glen South and Bantier. So Frank Murphy kills cattle with AVP, and he has a Lely robot. So when they go home Thursday evening, they're going to be on grass for a couple of weeks, and then they'll be assigned a diet with the robot, and they'll be in a separate pen to the rest of the cattle.
I'm here with Junior Baker of the Year, Ava Campbell, here in the Aldi tent. She has won 2 years in a row now. How does it feel to win?
Good, yeah.
You're a bit shocked.
Very. I wasn't expecting to do it again at all. I wasn't expecting to get this far even.
So tell me what you made.
I made a spice muffin with raisins soaked in tea and lemon, based off of the recipe of gherkin.
Okay. So how long have you been working on this for?
The whole year.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Finally, let's hear from the international entrepreneur Gunter Pauli, who was one of the keynote speakers at the recent Cork 2 conference on rural development. He told Irish Farmers Journal digital editor Thomas Hubert about the thriving chemical business he has been developing from the old thistle.
Today, when you have a field of thistles, then you feel obliged to go and buy the chemicals and destroy it, because if it hits your other fields, then you're in trouble. So we looked at thistles 5 years ago when we realized that these thistles are perennials. They don't need any chemicals, they don't need any fertilizer, they don't need any herbicides. They actually produce their own herbicides. And the thistle is a very invasive species. That means in order to farm it, you don't have to make any efforts.
We know that.
And therefore we said, but what is in there that we could use? So we realized that it has very good sugars, very good carbohydrates, very good lipids, oils, because it is actually family of the artichokes. And so the result is that when we let a couple chemists loose to figure out what it is, we realized we could make azelaic acid, pelargonic acid, we can make esters out of it, we can make lubricants, we can make mulching material. And it just kept on going. And then we realized that the leftover, after we've extracted those interesting molecules for chemistry, we realized that whatever is left over is an extraordinary product as an animal feed. So when we started adding all the business, we realized that there is an enormous business model behind it, and the cost price is for free. You don't even have to buy seeds. So to us, that was at first a shock. People said, you're crazy, that's not possible. But in the meantime, we are processing 360,000 tons.
How has that translated into an actual business operating today in Italy?
Well, we are selling lubricants, we're selling polymers. If you know a company like Lavazza that making coffee, the coffee capsules that used to be made out of aluminum are now making out of thistles. So, there's so many potential applications, and when we look around, we realize that if you have a perennial and you don't have to buy the seeds and you really can do an awful lot. So, yes, indeed, if you compare it to a sunflower, it will not have the same incidence of oils, but, hey, we're looking at a cost that is 20 times lower. And if it's 20 times cheaper, then you and I will agree that this is a very interesting product to work with. And in the meantime, the value chain, because we realized that those bacteria, this white stuff on the flower, was actually a bacterial enzyme, and that enzyme is used to make goat cheese. So now we have goat cheese, we have animal feed, we have lubricants, we have, we're generating €3,700 per ton of thistles.
What does this say about the way we approach farming and the land-based economy? What more can you derive from this example of the thistle?
The most important, what we learn from this, is that it's time to rethink the way we generate value. We've been too obsessed by looking at world market prices and how we can make it cheaper and cheaper and more volume and more volume and more volume. And now we start realizing that, it's not possible. It doesn't work anymore. And therefore, I think the thistle example gives us a very concrete reference, an inspiration base for saying, hey, there are other opportunities. And if you're only sticking to the food, of course, the thistle will not give you anything. But if you're ready to look at polymers and lubricants and enzymes, you really have an opportunity to create a great business.
Okay, Gunther Pauli, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app and on iTunes every Thursday. Brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.